nice question from Aaron here that I'm going to start with, actually, because this is a good way to start this. So, yeah, summarize A+ course, all right, and also thoughts on what you feel are best practices establishing a theory and troubleshooting. Yeah, okay. All right, so two things here. What's the best way to study A+? And the second thing is, what about the troubleshooting theory? Well, let me start, Aaron, and for everybody else, with the best way to study A+. I would go with, well, it's actually similar to what you outlined, Aaron, from Microsoft Office, where when you get inside the online learning expert, you get inside the video course, it starts off with pre-assessment, and then there's, videos for each session. At the end of each session, we have post-assessment. So from that standpoint, it's very similar to Office. Now, do we have geometrics practice test for A+? Not at this time. I will tell you that the practice tests we have for A+ within the LearnKey system is, the practice tests are pretty comprehensive. I mean, there are a ton of questions there that we wrote for the A+ exams. First. Secondly, within that, you also have labs to do. So there's a labs button to click. I would suggest doing that at the end of each session and going through those labs, because we tried as best we could to get those labs to line up pretty decently with examples of what you might see for simulation questions on the exam. So that's kind of the way in which we recover that, if you will. The big caveat with A+ is the project workbook. And I've mentioned this before, but it's very much worth mentioning again. There's, I want to say it's 175 pages for the 901 exam, and it's around 250 or so for the 902 exam. Whether you do those as you go through the videos, or you wait and do those at the end of each session, or you mix it up a little bit, those practices are really going to sharpen your skills for the test. That's why we do the workbooks. That's why we put those exercises together. Some of them are hands-on. Now, I understand also that there might be some of those that you can't do 100% because maybe you don't have the equipment to do it. We understand that. But at least read through those so you get an idea of what you might be asked about on the test, or how to go through, things from A to B. I mean, not everyone's going to have, extra switch lying around that you can just go set up or something like that. That's actually more network fun. But anyway, the point is that we also know that we have some of those project workbook exercises are like matchups, things like that. Again, they're there to sharpen your terms and definition skills. So the long-winded answer, Aaron, and for everybody else, is I would go pre-assessment, video, post-assessments, and labs. The labs before the post-assessments probably, although that's not really too picky. But definitely fit in the project workbook exercises during the session. So we put the project workbook exercises in the same order we cover the videos, which is pretty much the order in which the objectives are laid out for A+. So that's the path that I would take. Now, to your second question, as far as troubleshooting, well, the first thing we have to do is remind ourselves of what the troubleshooting theory is. Now, I've heard some people kind of balk at this because they say, well, that's not how really I troubleshoot in real life. Actually, it is. They just don't know it. They're the same steps. You just call it something different, But so let's go through this. Now, for the A+, there's 6 troubleshooting steps. Who can tell me here what the first one is?
Identify the problem.
Right, identify the problem. Now I'm going to go back and fill some details in after this, but I want to make sure we get the 6 steps in here. Okay? Identify the problem is the first step. Okay, second step is what? I got everything going in the chat box right now? No, okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, once you identify the problem, what do you reproduce it? It's along those lines, yes.
Test the theory.
That's a step. Okay, I'm going to say test that theory is, oh, I shouldn't have typed this in this way. Yeah, test the theory is a step. The question is, what's the next step? once you identify the problem. Test the theory is indeed a step. The question is, where does it belong?
I think that's number 3, actually.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Actually, you should come up with a theory, then test it, so.
Exactly. Establish a theory. It's called establish a theory of probable cause. Depending upon what publications you read, you might see this worded slightly differently, but basically it's establish a theory. Test the theory. Okay. So far, so good. We're halfway home. What would be the next one?
Possibly something to do with planning?
Getting warm.
I'm just not going to answer them all.
You shouldn't. This is a group effort here. Thank you for chiming in as much as you have so far.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, let's step back for a second here. All right, you think you figured out what the problem is? Jim says implement. Yes, exactly. So technically, it's establish a plan of action. And I'm paraphrasing just a little bit here, but implement a solution. Okay. So once you implement the solution, what's next? Think about a real-life troubleshooting thing you might have had. All right, you got the solution in. Then what do? Put it in layman's terms. Don't worry about the actual CompTIA term just yet. We'll get back to it. If it works, document it. That is a step. Testing is kind of a step. Let me ask you all this. Okay, so you say, yeah, it's fixed. You would tell them it's fixed and you walk away? By the way, I know a lot of people who do that, and they're the ones who end up getting chewed out later on. So, you think it's fixed, what do? You test, well, okay, there's a couple of comments that say test it. Technically, it's called verify full system functionality. That's basically saying the same thing as testing it, so we'll give you that. All right? Then you document findings, actions, and outcomes. Now, on the A+ exam specifically, don't be surprised if you get a test question saying so-and-so had a problem. They think they think that they figured out what it was. You know, like they figured out they think that DHCP is down or DNS is down or something. So what's next? Well, what's next is test the theory. What you have to pay attention to on those test questions is the way stuff is worded. Because what you're really going after is, all right, have they really figured out what the problem is, or do they think they figured out what the problem is? And that's really the difference between steps 2 and 3. So that's the kind of stuff you need to pay attention to. To me, of the 6 steps of troubleshooting, 2 and 3 are the most gray, if you will, as far as how you look at test questions. I'm not talking about real-life best practices of yet. What I'm talking about is just strictly how to get the test questions correct when you get those, and so you got to really pay attention there. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward because once you know what it is, you fix it. Once you fix it, you make sure it works. Once you make sure it works, you document stuff. So, in my mind, once you get past step 3, it's pretty straightforward. Now, as far as real-life, Aaron was asking about this, as far as real-life best practices. Well, I can tell you where I've seen a lot of people struggle with step number 1, identifying the problem. And I don't know if I did this in a tutor session before with some of you, but let's just throw this out there. We'll have a little troubleshooting discussion here. So I'm going to put something up on the screen here. By the way, can you see the screen? I mean, I'm sitting here talking about what I'm typing up. I mean, can you see it? Somebody? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, good. Thanks, Tutor. Okay, so user calls up and says, my email is not going through. You pick up the call, you hear this, let's do a little brainstorming here. What's your first move? Okay? So I'm going to list all of your, yeah, right. Yeah, and then you've got to be politically correct how you say that, right? Oh, that's funny. Okay, so let's see. Chain of custody, yeah, sure. All right, so, okay, so first thing is my email's not going through. All right, so we've gotten some responses here. And the first one is check for internet. Another one is it a user error? So you might start asking questions of the user, sure. All right. There was one in here that was really good. How long has it been going on? Yeah. All right. Usually with an email thing, it's pretty much a brand new issue. Hopefully, I mean, yeah, if somebody like, you know, can't send an email for a month and all of a sudden they call you, well then that's on them, not you, really. Let's see. Can you access it on a different device? I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but if you're in an environment where people use a lot of devices, if it's heavy on tablets and smartphones using for, you know, and used for email, for example, then yeah, that might be a legitimate question. Okay, so here's a best practice I'm going to give you all right now. All righty, and you can actually tie this into a lot of different problems. Not every one, but a lot of them. So here it goes. And I'm just going to say this in very general terms. All right, when I'm faced with problems such as this, my first question, and this is, you know, this is not something I'm going to be asking users usually. This is going to be something I'm going to be asking coworkers. How wide is the problem? All right, let me give you a real life example of this, because I used to be an email administrator a long time ago. And every once in a while I get a call, you know, with people saying, oh, my outbox is stuck. Okay, so the very first thing I'm finding out is this just one individual, or are we starting to get a lot of people calling up and saying that the outbox is stuck? Because that's going to really narrow down your problem right away. I mean, think about it. If you only have one user who can't get the email out, it's probably one of the things that you all listed. Internet's out, user error, those kinds of things. But, you know, if all of a sudden there's quite a few people calling up, well, then the server's stuck. And a lot of times, when it comes to something like email, I didn't have to wait too long. I remember one time, I had one person call me up and say, hey, my outbox is stuck. All right, I'll be down in a minute. And before I could get out of my office door, the phone rang like 4 more times. They all said the same thing, my outbox is stuck. Okay, so now you have to understand this was a long time ago, so we didn't check things remotely. We actually, you know, got out of the office and ran down to the server room and logged into the server and all that. But so I logged in, so the server was up and running, I logged into it, and what happened was some genius decided it was a good idea to send a high priority message out to all 12,000 people in the company with an attachment for a flyer for some upcoming barbecue. No, I'm not making this up. So what happens in email when a high priority message is out? Everybody else's message takes a back seat. So I'm looking at this log, I'm seeing all these messages going out with an attachment. By the way, they put graphics on the attachment, so it was nice and big, you know. Figure if you're going to dive, you might as well go all the way, right? So, so I'm sitting there just watching all these emails go out. I figure, all right, I'm just going to have to give this a couple of minutes, and then everybody's email will go out, and then they'll call me and tell me it's okay. And they'll think I actually fixed the problem when all I did was sit there. My point to all of you is, when you're doing this in real life, if you want a real life best practice and you get problems like these, find out how wide it is. What by that, you know, how many people are being affected? Is it just one? Is it just an office area? Or, you know, is your phone ringing off the hook? I'll tell you right away if it's a client issue or a server issue, really. And then you can use this troubleshooting theory to further drill down into things. So, by the way, I had a nice little chat with the person who sent out said email. I said, you know, if you're going to send a message out like that, time it to send it out at midnight or something. And it's a high priority, really? Company barbecue? Like 3/4 of the company's overseas. They're not going to get on the plane just to go to your barbecue. I hate to tell you. So fortunately, they knew I was like of the humorous type, so I was just kind of, you know, saying stuff. It's all in the delivery, really. So most important thing at the beginning is figure out how big of a problem it is. How wide is it? Then you can go through and establish what you think it is. You know, and most of the time it's going to be one of two things. Either going to be questioning users or checking hardware. Really, when it comes to stuff like this, one of two areas you're going. Testing the theory, yeah, a lot of times you can see if you can reproduce it. I'll tell you what the toughest ones are in real life. It's the ones with Microsoft Office. Because a lot of times I'll get incomplete information on, or if not Office, other applications, I'll get incomplete information on here. I'll be sitting here trying to reproduce it, and, you know, I don't know how exactly users play with these things, so it's a little bit tough sometimes. It's not as cut and dry. But you still want to test your theory out, you know, figure out why. Like, I'll give you another real-life example, and this was, yeah, it's kind of, exactly, Aaron, it's like an accidental DDoS attack. Yeah, true. Good point. I should use that. Like another problem I had one time is somebody was having a problem with Excel. And they said that they were getting out-of-memory error messages in Excel. And they were asking me if there's a limit with the number of sheets. And I said, not that I know of. So I saw the error message. I saw that the person did a lot of charts. And that's one thing, too. Sometimes you just have to really see what the file is in order to do a little diagnosis here. Long story short, it was an older version of Excel. This was quite a few years ago, and before they had all these colors they supported, and the file could only support 56 colors at once. Well, this person was of the mindset of having 2 different colors for every chart and never repeating a color. So after 28 charts, they got error messages. Kind of a wild one, yeah. But, you know, you had to do a little research to get that. So that's part of steps 2 and 3, establishing a theory and testing the theory. And in, you know, a real life best practice, you know, in that situation, I just told the user, well, you know, you might want to repeat a color once or twice. Well, I don't want to do that. No one's going to notice. Relax. We'll keep it a secret. And then they're like, can't you do something about it? And I'm like, buddy, I'm not Microsoft. So sometimes it's just a matter of working with the users to find the best solution. Last part of the troubleshooting theory that applies to best practice. I'm going to jump down to step number 6 here. I said this in the video, but when you're doing this in real life, documenting findings, actions, and outcomes, just writing the word closed on a ticket, no. Just tell yourself right now you're going to at least put a sentence there, what you did. Because if somebody can't get on the network and someone just writes closed on the ticket, that doesn't tell me what the problem was. You know, did they forget their password? Did they trip over a cable and it got unplugged? I mean, what's the deal? So you always want to put in there what you did. Because this is how people who manage this stuff look for patterns, look for trends. You know, I've been in some places where they decided to make a really complex password and then all of a sudden nobody could remember their password. So they sort of had to compromise that a little bit. But we wouldn't have known that if people hadn't been writing in the document section of the help desk tickets that people were forgetting their passwords and they were getting really mad about this new password policy. So anyway, a few things for you to chew on as far as troubleshooting theory. But for the test, just pay attention to the wording of the question and put yourself in that situation. It's like, okay, well, if this is my problem, then where am I right now? And you'll do just fine on those questions. So meanwhile, I got a couple other questions here. One's on chain of custody. Another one here. Is it correct that with Windows Server, Windows 10 clients have to run Windows 10 Pro to join domains? Yes. In fact, it really doesn't matter what version of Windows Server or Windows client you have. It's always been the situation where they've got to have the Pro version to join domains. So that's a pretty general one there. Oh, by the way, that's a good test question too. You know, you might get a test question that says so-and-so's got Windows 8, can't join a domain. Well, it's because they don't have Pro. It's very simple. The other thing you want to look at is with that particular situation, another thing that'll give away they don't have Pro is the lack of being able to use the remote desktop connection. You gotta have Pro for that too, which makes sense because home users don't know mostly how to secure their machines, so why would you trust them with that? Is the mentality. So, and by the way, speaking of operating systems, that's one of those things where it's like, and here's a little testing advice. In fact, I'm going to write this down here. I should have written this 2 days ago because the same kind of question came up. Okay, so operating system test questions. Here's some friendly advice. Avoid getting hung up on operating system versions. Very simply. For example, any version of Windows must be the Pro version or actually, let me take that back. For Vista, it's business, because Vista had to be different in every way, shape, or form, including its ability to work. You didn't hear me say that. Any version of Windows must be Pro in order to join a domain. So you don't want to get hung up on the fact that you get a test question saying, well, they got Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows 8.1. Doesn't matter. It must be Pro. Oh, Enterprise 2. Thank you, Jim, for clarifying. Yes, Pro or higher. So with some Windows operating systems, they have Ultimate versions. 7's got Ultimate. Vista has Ultimate. So that is one, and then another one for you here, same goes for the control panel. Once you get familiar with the control panel, there's hardly a difference among the different operating systems. Biggest difference with Windows 8, besides the cosmetics, the biggest difference is location of startup items. With 8.1, it's in the task manager, whereas in 7 and Vista, it's in MS config. So there's one difference there. And pardon me if my grammar is not perfect here, but hey, we're live. So that's one thing that you want to look out for there. So give me 1 second here to bring up the next question here that came up. Is there a difference in MBR commands? There's a slight difference between 7 and 8. Let's see, MBR commands, there's a couple of slight wording differences, so I'd make sure you study both versions. Offhand, I don't remember exactly what that difference is. I'd have to look that up. But I'm trying to think. There was a, you know what? Actually, let me back up a minute. 7 to 8, I don't really think there's much. I know there was a big difference from XP. That's what it is. There was a big difference from XP in that situation. So, but no, not much really. I'm trying to find my notes on chain of custody here while you're going through that. Did I close? It was one of those things we filmed in the networking. Here we go, data forensics. Alrighty. Okay, chain of custody. All right, let me see what the question is on that. Talk a little about chain of custody and key points to look for in the exams. Yeah, okay, so chain of custody. Most important thing to get right here is there's two things. Number one, the order in which this happens. And then secondly, proper handling of evidence. And I would say that the second part of it is most important. So for chain of custody, all right? Now, first step, now we're talking about chain of custody. We're talking about legal issues here. We're talking about things like, I'll give you a good example, okay? This is an unfortunate real life example I had on the job. We had one place I worked at, we had a guy who was a really good recruiter, really popular with people, and then he started sending out emails on things that the vast majority of people in a workplace would find highly inappropriate. I don't need to go into details, you can figure it out. Anyway, he got caught. So somebody blew the whistle on him. So the first step of chain of custody is get a first responder on the scene. All right, now let me define what a first responder is. First responder is going to be a trained security person. Now, if you're thinking, does this really happen a lot in small businesses? No. I mean, you got to have some size here in order for this to be a legitimate step here. All right, but going through this, the first step is get a first responder on the scene to determine if a breach has occurred. Now, there's basically two types here. The first one being they did something, like they sent out bad email. The second one is that they saw some data they weren't supposed to see. Like maybe there's some confidential records and you had somebody who didn't have the proper security clearance to do it, but they happened to be on the machine, and whoever did the role definition didn't do a very good job, so this person saw some stuff. Which, by the way, that's not on the user. That's on the person who sets that up. That's on the team who sets that up. But, okay, first responder's job is to determine if a breach has occurred. All right? Secondly, secure the area. Now, I'm going by the book here, but basically, when you're dealing with chain of custody, I mean, any of you who've watched like crime shows, I don't watch them much, but anybody that does, first thing they tell you is, don't touch anything at the evidence. Let the people who handle the evidence handle it. Because the biggest point, and I'm going to just put this here, the biggest point is any evidence not 100% accounted for is inadmissible in court. That is the number one thing you got to keep in mind here with chain of custody. Any evidence has to be handled properly. If there's any hint of it being handled improperly, it won't be admissible in a court of law. Because it goes past the burden of proof. It goes past beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you get a test question about what the most important thing is with chain of custody, it's the proper handling of evidence. So back to the steps here. Okay, so the second step is secure the area. Make sure nobody touches anything until the proper authorities get on the scene. All right? So call whoever needs to basically document and take action. Now, in a lot of cases, it's going to be the person or team in charge of security of the company. If it's something of a legal matter, you might have to get law enforcement involved. But the point is, nothing gets touched until those people arrive on the scene. All right? So then the third one is document everything at the scene. That's the job of the people who are called in on this. Document the entire scene. And so once that happens, and collecting evidence, now getting back to this, so you're collecting evidence, I'll give you a good example. If it's something that's on the screen, make sure that the hard drive is intact, take a screenshot, take pictures if you have to of what the person did. And I know some of you might be thinking, is there like, some kind of common sense factor? Well, you would hope. But, they put this in here for a reason, and people just don't follow it. So, documenting the scene, collecting evidence. Now, biggest thing about chain of custody here with evidence, I want to draw a line here for you because there is something really important about all this. All right? And it's basically this, ladies and gentlemen. Very simply, the whole bringing it all together with chain of custody, the whole idea is simply this. Any piece of evidence needs to have documented who touched it and when. So any pieces of evidence that are at a scene, the computers, any files, hard drives that are extracted from the computer, any of those things. You need to start running documentation on who touched it and when. Because, again, if it cannot be accounted for, the evidence is inadmissible. And believe you me, whoever is accused of doing this stuff, they're going to get a legal team involved. That legal team is going to look for any loophole in the evidence. And if they find one, case closed. So, those are your biggest things with chain of custody here. Does that help, whoever asked? So let me make sure there wasn't another question in between that. Yeah, okay. So that's your big thing about chain of custody. So as far as where you see this in the CompTIA test, there is a little bit of that in A+, but not a whole lot. Network Plus and Security Plus, you better know this. Is there someone for whom, okay, Aaron, are you talking about this whole chain of custody thing? Is there someone for whom damage control and what steps and how far would they go? Yeah, actually, that's the first responder's job. First responder is going to be a trained individual, you know. And you know what? It could be a combination of things. Like, it could be somebody from IT and it could be somebody from HR. You know, let's say somebody passes along a joke some people find inappropriate or whatever. You know, they'll have HR look at it. And it might just be very simply this, you know, whoever did it, you know, just get to talking to. You know, think, watch what you do, watch what you say. Not everyone's got the golden sense of humor you do. Once your role is, okay, if you're IT and the first responder's there, basically you're just helping that person out. You're helping that team out. Really, your role, Caesar, at that point is not much. Because then if you're just, like if you're in a help desk role or junior network admin role and you see something, once the first responders are there, then they're taking over from there. And look, without getting too deep on the subject here, I've had some situations to where, you know, people are saying, oh, well, what if I don't report something? Well, the truth is, if somebody doesn't report something, then their job's going to be on the line. So one of the things, and it's a really unfortunate situation, but one of the things is if you're in the IT department and you notice something that you know is not going to pass a smell test, you've got to report it. Now, some places, you know, there's a little bit of a judgment call there. You know, like a couple times, for you know, example, I had some interns working on stuff in some isolated rooms, and they were on some chat lines, and I just basically walked by. I said, you know, they monitor that stuff, right? And they're like, ooh, and they closed it down right away, and I just laughed as I walked off because nobody else saw it. I did tell them, you do it again, and, you know, more people are going to find out. So, now, that was a long time ago. Nowadays, I'd probably have to turn them in right away or I'd be in trouble. So that's why your security policies have to be so, what types of certs would a general first responder hold? Probably Security Plus, if I had to guess. At that point, Aaron, it's more of people getting trained properly. You know, a lot of times it's going to be people in HR, so maybe some kind of HR certification, which I don't know any HR certifications, but I'm sure they exist. That's a really good question, Aaron. I've never really thought about that too much. But it's more important that they get a first responder trained, you know, because it could be somebody who used to be in law enforcement or something like that. But more often than not, if there's a single certification, I'd say Security Plus, because then they know what they're looking for. But see, every company, Aaron, is different, so it really is a matter of being well trained and like what is considered to be appropriate and what isn't. So, like places I've worked, I don't really recall any particular certification anybody has, but I always knew that somebody with HR was going to get involved really quickly. You know, because you know, they're the quote unquote police on that. So, but you know, the next person I meet in HR who actually holds an IT certification will be the first, I think. So it's probably more of an HR certification kind of thing, really. Good news is you don't have to worry about it on any of the exams. But chain of custody, yeah, that definitely you want to get stuck in your heads if you're going to do Network Plus or Security Plus, for sure. Okay, good stuff. Let's see, what else here? We got, yeah, Caesar, I loved your question about first of all, once the responder was. Mine was always to walk away, but, you know. Then again, one thing I learned very quickly in the IT business, best not to stick your nose in something you don't need to. Or else before you know it, your whole head's going to be in there. And it might get stuck, and then you can't get it out. So, hyperbole, yes, but. All right. What else we got? Let's see, let me just scroll this down and see. No more questions. Yeah, all right, who else has got something? This is good, some pretty good stuff here. I haven't talked about chance.
Earlier. Hey, this is Eric. I finished putting up a in the exam section on the form. I just finished posting with my exam today. I passed the the 902, and I just
congratulations.
It up. Thank you.
Hey.
If you don't, I mean, it's in there. I'm going to throw a quick, I don't know if that's going to work or not. I just put the link in for the second one. On the second one, I also have a link back to my first one from a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
A couple quick things about it, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It started me off right away with 3 simulations back to back. All 3 were Windows 7 based. And I threw a little note in my forum post. One of the things I noticed right away was, for example, in one I had to open up control panel and figure out how to do certain things. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to sound like a brain dump. But the thing I noticed right away was there's almost a guide built in because a lot of stuff is unclickable. They want you to go to a certain place. So out of all the things, if you can imagine, that are in control panel, only 2 were clickable. One was the right answer, one was the wrong one. Trial and error, you can look at it and figure it out pretty simple. So just as a food for thought, you can look at some of that to guide yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like I was saying about the first one, where you flag a question because you're not sure, and then later on the exam, the question is kind of answered in a roundabout way through a different question, so you can go back and easily get it. The biggest things I saw on the exam test, troubleshooting was big. I got a lot of those, and that included the steps, the order, and especially, it seemed like I had a lot of user calls. It would say Joe or Ann or whoever, and I had those one after another, troubleshooting. Mobile devices, it was pretty much third-party app type stuff, power issues and connectivity. Security dealt with local systems, mobile devices, some general knowledge type stuff on security. It's a basic, A+ technician stuff, nothing to get into Network Plus, but definitely right on the border. My Linux and Mac OS were actually almost completely limited to command line and backup and recovery. Just know which to use, like especially with the Mac OS. The hardware, only thing I remember on that one is there was one RAID question. There was one other question about replacing a drive for a particular reason, troubleshooting-wise, and then the other, I think I had maybe 2 on the disposal and destruction of, said hardware. And then the only thing I really recall was under the software area, there were a couple things about the differences in your OSs, like which one had certain things, and not so much the details of what it contained, but just different things like I'll give you an example. There was actually a match for some of the Cert Master studying I was doing up till yesterday, and that was, which version of Windows included the Windows App Store, like the Windows Store, things like that. There were some types of formatting, and then issues with third-party software installs or, that employees are doing. So that was pretty much everything I remember about it. It is posted, So people feel free to go ahead and take a look. And if you have any questions, just give me a holler.
Cool. Yeah, okay, so Eric, thank you so much for that, and congratulations. That makes my day right there. You're telling
Thanks.
me you got there, so that's really cool.
Yeah, Network Plus 2 weeks from today.
You're a busy man.
Yeah, yeah, fun.
Good. Okay, so there's a question that came up earlier, and I wanted to clarify about FixMBR and the differences between the commands. Listen, the commands are the same Windows 7 to 8. It's just how you get there that's different. Whereas in the system recovery, you get the system recovery tool in Windows 7, and you bring up a command prompt there. Windows 8, you want to go with repair your computer and then choose troubleshoot and command prompt. So basically, it's not a whole lot of difference once you get there. It's just kind of how you get there is the biggest difference. So, but you still need to know about the major. Yeah, they're both still bootrec/fixmbr commands to fix the master boot record. You still have fix boots to fix the boot itself. You still have the rebuild BCD in case you're rebuilding for a dual boot. So those are no different. Just how you get there is the biggest difference. So, Eric, you reminded me of the day I took the 902 exam.
Oh, hey, you know what, Jason? You just remind me of something else. I did have a boot rec question. It was pretty simple. It was very, as long as you know some of the commands. The cool thing is, in that question, it actually told me, you know, there's a problem with the boot of this system. It showed a picture of it. And the thing is, as long as you clicked on the command line, all you had to do was type help, and you saw the command you needed. It was pretty straightforward. The one thing I should mention, and this almost threw me a little bit. You just remind me of talking about the scan, the SFC, and that, like the /scan now.
Yeah.
I had that question 2 in a row. The first one was kind of like what command would you use to fix this? And then the very next question was SFC/scan now is used to fix what? And I'm like, that's the same exact question, just flip-flopped around. You know what I'm saying? So be aware of that, because I flagged both of those and went back, and I'm like, would they really do this to somebody? You know? You know, and they do. So again, food for thought.
Cool. Oh, we've gotten all kinds of good news on tests today. Eric was A+. We had somebody pass a CISSP test, I found out. And 2 of our employees this week got their IC3s. So, now granted, I didn't do the IC3 course. That's why it's sealed. But still, excellent for them. All right, what else do we have here? I kind of like these. Hey, Tristan, I got to say, I kind of like these free-for-alls. Keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, definitely. That's pretty much how I do all of the sessions.
Yeah. And then as far as anybody who else is studying for the 902 exam, I'm going to back up point for point what Eric said. Because I had a lot of the same things when I took the 902. It gets back, listen, it gets back to what I said on Tuesday about the different objectives. For CompTIA tests, when you see the words given a scenario, good chance you might get a simulation question. When you see describe, just be able to describe it.
Hey, Jason, one other thing you just remind me of as well. I was seeing this throughout both, you know, the book we use that you have, the from LearnKey for 901 and 902, and I found it especially with the Cert Master also. And I tested this, and it actually worked great. I'm not saying do this. Anybody listening, just do what works for you. But I found that in the practice tests, and even in today, any questions dealing with one of the answers saying VPN, like your connection, whether it was a mobile device, a computer, laptop, whatever it been, tablet, 10 out of 10 I find that VPN answer is going to be the correct one. You still have to read everything and make sure, you want to double check. But I thought that was an interesting little tidbit I discovered a couple weeks ago, because every single time if VPN is mentioned, that's going to be the answer. And it worked for me. Like I say, for everybody listening, just read it for yourself, and you might figure things out that indicate a pattern.
The dog agrees too.
I'm about ready to choke his dog.
Okay, let's see. Let me see. Here's another question that came up. Eric, thank you very much for that. In my experience in the working world, is there an average number of certs you would say generally someone in IT may have? I don't know if you're going to like my answer, but I'll tell you. It all depends on what the companies push. I've seen some, listen, I've been in some companies where hardly anybody in IT had a certification because nobody cared. Like when I worked at a hospital. They just wanted people to make sure that they had that they knew how to do all the hospital software and hardware. It wasn't important. Now, I've also been in some places where they said, well, you've got X amount of days to get your Security Plus if you want to stay here.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, I would tell you that the work culture at that particular company is going to dictate the number of certs that people are going to have. The more that it's a consulting kind of firm, the more important I would say the certifications are. The more it's specialized, like hospital or retail or whatever, they might want you to go get a certification with the software that they use, but as far as the certifications that we have, they might help. I'll give you a good example. I used to work at a hospital. Now, this was a long time ago, and I had my MOS, and that ended up getting me a few thousand more a year at the start for my salary, so that was pretty cool. But, Aaron, my answer is it really all depends on where you're at.
Well, hey, Jason, I guess you answered it perfectly. I really appreciate it. And what I've just kind of been wondering, just as like career advice, through your experience, it's like taking all these different certifications. And for myself, I would really love to be, something high end and particularly security or something like that. So I was just trying to think, besides not having a college degree, what advice perhaps you would say, hey, if you want to do something that's pretty cool, you may really want to do this or that.
Sure. Okay, so let me give you a couple of overall thoughts on this. Number one, a certification is never going to hurt you. Pure and simple. Certifications you obtain will never hurt you. I mean, this isn't like you have to do the right kind of electives to get into a college here. Your having certifications will prove that you have the fortitude to stick with it and, get those papers. So the very first thing I'll say is having certifications won't hurt you. Secondly, biggest piece of job advice I can give anybody is when you're going for an interview, have ready concrete answers. Now, what do I mean by this? When they ask you about some concept, don't just answer the question, explain how you've done it in real life, or explain how you would do it. Or maybe, like I've had some, I don't want to bore you with all the details right now, but I've been in some job interviews where, they asked me about a concept, and before I answered it, I said, okay, before I answered it, how do you use that around here? And they couldn't, give me the exact information. I said, because my answer is going to depend upon the context in which this is being used. I said, if you don't want to tell me what you do it for, give me a scenario and I'll answer it. See, that proves that you're not just firing off rapid-fire answers, you're actually putting some thought into this. I've had some job interviews where I show up with a laptop and I demonstrate some things that I can do. That will apply in some cases. Other cases, it's not really that necessary, but, those types of things will get you to stand out ahead of others. I mean, anybody can give a straight-up answer to a question. And the other thing is anybody can tell somebody what they want to hear. But can you really take a question that they get in an interview and put a good real-life situation into it? That's really what you want to focus on. Because it proves that you can think things through. It proves that you can put some thought to it. It proves that whatever certifications you have, you can apply. Because I know some people who've got certifications and they can barely get a network started. So does that mean that the paper is worthless? No. But you got to be able to do some things to back that up, or at least when you're in an interview, demonstrate to somebody that you can. So my biggest advice is, have good, concrete answers to the questions. Take the time when you're going to an interview, do some research on the company. Find out what their size is. One of the biggest things you can do if you're doing any kind of career, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, if it's a company, find out what their size is. Because the rules that they're going to have are going to be really dictated upon size, especially with network design. And it's not like you have to go investigate their network and hack into it before you go to the interview. That's not even what I'm saying. But, if I'm going to a job interview to where it's a company of 100 people versus a company of 10,000 with like offices in 5 different countries, my answers to the same questions are going to be a lot different. So take the time to do the research, be able to apply it with what they have. That's how you win interviews, right there. And I speak from experience there too. So I don't know how much that helps, but hopefully a little bit. All righty then.
Thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
Any last minute questions? We're just about at the end of the session.
You're welcome, Jeff. You're welcome, Aaron. You're welcome, everybody. Fun time today. Be even more fun if the Broncos lose tonight. I mean,
yeah, I'm with you on that.
I know it.